Anime has changed.
War has changed.
For the very first time in a long time, anime is becoming quite popular. And in a lot of ways, especially due to the rise of the internet, now is one of the best times to be a fan of anime. For starters, it's far more accessible than it used to be, as well as far more abundant. Unfortunately, because of its rise in popularity, it's also, in a weird way, a bad time to be an older fan of anime, having to deal with a younger, more naive fanbase, as well as a slew of new shows that are nothing like the shows we grew up loving. Now, my own classification as being an older anime fan is kind of weird. I use quotes on the term older because, well, hell, I'm only 20 years old. But I've loved anime most of my life, and pre-Crunchyroll me had gained a certain expectation of the shows I watched. A. The stories were often more unique than what I saw on American television. B. Shows had episode counts of about 24 plus, no one season 12 episode bullshit. And C, here's the big one, stories were fucking finished. Even if we had to wait for a second season, it was usually announced sooner rather than later. Not that there wasn't the occasional shorter show whose story dropped like a dead fish, but still, it's not the same as it used to be. Now you may be wondering why this opening statement is a part of the review for Chaika the Coffin Princess, and there's only really one simple reason. Though Chaika is not necessarily excellent, it does check off my previous checklist, A through C. This has all those previous things that I mentioned, the episode count, the unique story, and, well, it's actually fucking finished. Not to mention, the show does have a lot of good to it, and its good far outweighs its negatives. Now let's move on to the plot and characters of Chaika the Coffin Princess. Chaika is a fantasy series made by Studio Bones. It features our four protagonists Chaika, Toru, Akari, and Francesca, who are on a mission to recover the remains of Chaika's dead father, who happens to be an evil emperor named Gaz. Too bad for our heroes, they're not the only ones looking for Gaz's remains, and Chaika isn't the only Chaika. Now, this plot actually has a decent amount of intricacies. Chaika's quest doesn't just affect her, it affects the characters like Toru under her command, it's connected to the history of this world and the politics behind it. On top of all that, a show about a nice young girl on the hunt for her evil dead father's remains just so she could mourn him definitely checks off my previously mentioned expectations, at least the interesting story aspect. And it helps that we have a well-rounded group of main characters. Chaika and Toru have a really solid chemistry going on. Chaika, Toru, and Akari all have nifty backstories, even for as little as we know about Chaika, and Francesca is just a delight when she's on screen. Also, she's a war-hungry dragon, so that's pretty badass. Well, she's actually technically a dragoon by the story's lore, but still, same thing. And for the most part, even other side and supporting characters are done well, including Chaika Red. Yes, there's another Chaika. Our Chaika is technically named Chaika Trabant. Red Chaika has a different last name, but when they're both on screen, they're just, spoken of as this is the black Chaika, which is our Chaika, this is the red Chaika. They're identified by colors, and there's more Chaikas than just them two as well. Unfortunately, it isn't all shining butt cheeks and rainbow farts for this show. I have a number of problems and concerns with the show's plot and characters. First, I'll start with a positive to explain a negative. Chaika, the Coffin Princess, does a great job of building up certain events and building suspense to certain events that will transpire later, only for those events to end up being underwhelming. A few unresolved plot threads, like the romance between Chaika and Toru, and the side characters who were helping Chaika Red through the show. A creepy and uncomfortable, and not at all funny relationship between Toru and Akari, all Akari's fault, by the way, And the show even has a tendency to have a tonal clash. What do I mean by this? I mean, sometimes the show wants to be serious, and sometimes the show wants to have a more comedic aspect. It sometimes clashes, and that's just not good. And the biggest offender of all is a group of side characters who throughout Season 1 have what I call Team Rocket Syndrome. Team Rocket Syndrome is a phrase I invented for a group of side characters in an anime who are always chasing the main characters. These side characters almost always follow one of a few rules. They misunderstand the main characters or are misunderstood by the main characters. And even if neither of those are true, they still at least follow more or less of an anti-hero route for their characters, like Jesse and James from, well, Pokemon, thus Team Rocket Syndrome. I don't like this because they create artificial tension, but are obviously not a true threat to our characters, and they take time away from characters we actually care about and plot threads we actually care about. Not saying TRS, or Team Rocket Syndrome, is always bad, but it usually is. Thankfully, these characters are later thrust into more interesting roles and no longer suffer from Team Rocket Syndrome. But to show what a plague Team Rocket Syndrome is on the anime we see, here's a list of shows, many of which I like, just a disclaimer, that have Team Rocket Syndrome at one point or another, big or small, meaning it may only plague the show for a few episodes, or an arc, or half the show, much like it only plagues Chaika for half of its run. So, here's a big list. You can read them if you want. Now let's move over to music and overall sound design. As for the general soundtrack, the first opening is awesome. The rest is fine, but still, it doesn't hold up to the first. I was sad when the first opening Dadakeno was replaced. The rest of the show's OST is fine and works well within the fantasy setting. The noticeable praise I have to give to the sound design in regards to weaponry is the clashing of swords, and the sound is crisp as hell when combat is going on. And Toru's blades, for example, are even able to connect via a wire. That sounds awesome, especially when he's Kratosing his daggers around. As for the dubs, both Japanese and English are good, though I recommend English due to Chaika and Chaika Red having just these adorable speech conditions. I'm not even kidding, like, here's a clip.
You serious?
Serious. Need it. No question. Carry burden. Must do.
Carry burden?
Yes. Carry. Mission. No stop. Maybe whole life.
Art and animation. When the animation is done by Studio Bones, you expect a certain level of quality. After all, this is the studio that made Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood and Eureka 7. Though rarely spectacular, the animation is at least consistent and rarely dips in quality. It's also sometimes filled with these really cool visceral moments. And when it needs to bring its A game, it does. Although the art of the show is far more impressive. The overall fantasy aesthetic is par for the course, but magical weapons like Gondors and vehicles like airships and these carriages that are powered by something called magic fuel are great standouts. Each individual Chaika, for example, of which there are many, look just similar enough to tell if it's a Chaika or not, but just different enough to fit each's individual personality. For example, Chaika Trabant, our main Chaika, has an outfit that is black with white lacing around it. This fits her girly, more polite personality. Chaika Red, however, has a red fiery outfit that fits her fiery personality and overall aggressive nature. And hell, female outfits in general just look damn impressive. Toru and Akari's Iron Blood forms look wicked cool. On top of that, look at Akari and Toru's designs overall. Both share a sibling-like bond, and Akari even refers to Toru as her brother, even though they aren't brother and sister for real. but Akari's green hair matches Toru's green eyes, and Toru's blue hair matches Akari's blue eyes. It's this subtle symbolism that the show has throughout it, not just with this, that I think gives Chaika a big plus. Not to mention the badass creature designs. Now it's time to get to the final verdict for this show. Chaika delivered a lot that I look for on a personal level. Despite suffering from a few plot and character hiccups, the story is overall very solid. On top of that, actually finished. Other than that, it just doesn't excel too well in the animation and music department sometimes, but it has its moments, and its art and overall sound design is awesome. I award the show with an overall of 8.15 out of 10, and recommend you purchase this show. The fact it's finished helps that recommendation. If you've already seen Chaika the Coffin Princess and are looking for something similar, I recommend Moribito Guardian of the Spirit and Penguin Drum. Both of these shows, in regards to Chaika, they all vary in terms of quality, but the reason why I chose them is that the main group of characters in each of these shows share a similar relationship to each other. There's always a more sort of protective and guardian-like figure within the main group, and the figure that needs protected because that particular character is special. So that's why I chose those shows, if you're looking for something else. Anyways, if you like this review, please decide to give it a like and maybe subscribe to my AnimeQuest channel here. And anyways, I will see you guys on the next quest for anime.